Michael Verney, there's a big story brewing in Galway at the moment of an alleged incident where a player has come back from America, hasn't gone through the 14-day quarantine, and played for Baha in a relegation clash against Kinvara. Now, Baha won the game and it sends Kinvara into relegation final on scoring difference. Now, you've been chasing up this story with the Indo. Can you tell us kind of what you've found so far? And as I said, it's an alleged incident at this stage.
Yeah, there's an awful lot of moving parts to it, Shane. I've tried to contact the Baja club and haven't been able to get them or get any comment from them. I have been chatting to people involved in the Kinvara club, but obviously Pat Carney commented on it the other night. So Kinvara were aware that this might arise last week, so they sent correspondence to the Galway County Board last Tuesday, which I have seen, and wanted some sort of guidance on it. And the Galway County Board referred back to another query that had been made by another club to Crow Park in late July, I suppose just when games were kicking off again, about overseas players and what happens in that type of instance. And a high-ranking Crow Park official obviously sent correspondence back to them, and like it was his understanding and everyone's understanding, I suppose, that if you were coming back from a country which wasn't on the green list, that you would have to quarantine for 14 days and that you would be ineligible for any games and you would not be able to make contact basically with or have any contact within a club or anything like that for 14 days. So that was referred back to that correspondence. That was on the Tuesday before the match. The player who is alleged to have returned from the United States returned in a couple of days before the game, allegedly, and when Kinvara officials realised that he was going to be playing in the game, they raised it with a county board official at the ground, and also raised it with the referee Liam Gordon, an inter-county referee that me and you would both know fairly well. I'm understood that within his powers there wasn't really much that he could do. Like his hands were kind of tied, but the game went ahead anyway. And as it would happen, Baha got a late goal to win by 6, and that actually puts Kinvara into a relegation final on scoring difference against Kilnadima Leitrim. In the immediate aftermath of the game, Kinvara contacted the county board again with correspondence saying that they wanted a full investigation brought into this alleged incident. So at Monday's CCC meeting, this was raised, and an investigation has been launched by Galway County Board into the alleged incident, which has fairly large ramifications for the clubs involved and potentially for other clubs as well, because if the player in question did not quarantine, they're probably putting a lot of people in risk. I know the people in Kinvara are saying that it was a blatant disregard to public health and that it was an affront to a lot of the work that was being done in clubs and counties around the country. The GA have kind of passed over power of this to the Galway County Board, so it's really going to be really, really interesting to see kind of what happens next and just how large of an investigation is launched into something that I think would cause quite a bit of outrage amongst many people. Like me and you are heavily involved in hurling teams and want to play matches and things like that. But if there's government regulations in place, you can't flout them either. So it's it's going to be a lot of moving parts to this, and it'll probably gather a good bit of steam over the next few days and weeks, I'd say.
Just to back up the truck a small bit and I'm going to ask you two questions. One, was there any talk before the match that the game might be called off, that Kinvara might just say, look, we're not playing this isn't right? And then the second question would be, you know, the way in certain counties this year they've gotten rid of relegation because they didn't want situations like this. And is this issue coming home to roost where some county boards foresaw this sort of an incident?
Yeah, the first question is, I'm understood from chatting to Kinvara officials that they made contact with the Galway County Board, and if they did not play, or if they didn't come out into the pitch when they saw that this player was playing, that they would have to forfeit the game, lose the points, and would end up in relegation. So that wasn't really a runner for them. Like, I suppose it just wasn't really a runner for them. It wasn't something that they weren't probably comfortable with playing, but they weren't comfortable with not playing as well. And your second question, Shane, just recap that again.
Well, it's the issue around relegation, and in some counties this year they've decided to not have relegation because they didn't want a situation like this arising. I mean, there's a number of reasons. Maybe teams will be massively weakened, or then the flip side, that in this alleged situation, and again we have to ram that home, that it is an alleged situation, that you don't want clubs playing guys who may or may not be a risk.
Well, what you're saying there is you're making lads make a choice when there could be a very, very difficult choice to make. It's like we talked about this before, and many managers and different people have talked about it as well. Lads would feel like they're letting down their club or letting down their teammates if they didn't play. The alleged player here who was supposed to come back from the States, if there was not relegation on the line, there would have been no need to return from the States. So yeah, I totally agree with you there. I think it was quite a prudent move by any county board that got rid of relegation in the various grades just for this year. This year is an absolute outlier in every type of way. Like, it's just completely different. And to put lads probably in that position where they have to make a choice is, it's not. I don't think it's a smart move by county boards. And like, without being smart, we wouldn't be having this conversation if there was no relegation in Galway, because the alleged incident that has taken place, it wouldn't have taken place. It simply wouldn't have taken place. Somebody wouldn't have considered, putting their health and other people's health in jeopardy for a game that was essentially meaningless.
Yeah, and like what's coming to mind to me now is it's unfair on a club like Kinvara to have to make a decision beforehand. Do we play this or do we not? It's unfair on what is largely going to be volunteers in Galway GA for this to be foisted on them, that they have to decide it. It's a tough one all around, and I don't know if you have a sense of where this is going to go. I mean, you see people getting leaving cert results and they're now taking it to court. I mean, where does this thing go?
My understanding of the investigation is as well that the Galway County Board, and again this is alleged also because it's very hard to get all of the facts on the table. I have quite a lot of them, but it's very hard to get them all on the table. But allegedly, Kinvara have to essentially show the evidence to the Galway County Board, show the evidence of wrongdoing, which is that's like me and you going to the guards and saying that someone has attacked me. It's like, show me the evidence, show me where it happened, show me everything. Whereas like, that's essentially their job. So I'm not too sure are the Galway County Board passing the buck in that instance. But it's very, very messy. Like the COVID officers involved in the two clubs and the Galway COVID officer as well. Like, if this was raised, and it definitely was, because I've seen the emails, it was raised in the week before the match. Questions will probably have to be asked of the Galway COVID officer, of the Baha COVID officer, and of the Kinvara COVID officer, and that's probably who this is going to come back on. Now listen, they're all volunteers as well, so it's a very, very tricky situation for them to be put in. But yeah, it's messy, and it's going to get messier.
Yeah, because like, I mean, you're playing, I'm playing, you show up to training matches, there are people there at all of our clubs that are paying attention to, like, you're being reminded to fill in the form online on the GA's website. You have guys there ticking the boxes to make sure they know who's been at training, the COVID officer. It's so tough. Like, if you have a situation where you've got a relegation clash and the manager is saying, look, say nothing. I mean, there are people who are being unduly put under pressure. You would imagine, again, this is all alleged and we're not specifically talking about Baha here, but it creates terrible situations, and again comes back to the fact that relegation does exist. And actually, by the same token, the fact that county titles are, that they're counted this year, we'd probably have had games to win county titles, to win semi-finals where something similar has happened.
100%, yeah. Anything where there's anything at stake, they're not like meaningless matches. So there's probably going to have to be a choice that people are going to have to make. Just interesting as well, like, this sort of thing is not necessarily covered. There's not a GA rule for this, but I think it's rule 7.2E, I think, where the GA say about possibly bringing the games into disrepute. This is what that sort of an alleged offence would probably fall under. But again, like, just looking into the sanctions that happen there, it's usually it would be potentially an 8-week suspension for the player and an 8-week suspension for the club, which wouldn't fit the crime, because if they get an 8-week suspension, grand, they're like, Baha's season is over. So the player gets suspended for 8 weeks. and the club gets suspended for 8 weeks, and it's pretty meaningless. So it doesn't look like any kind of retrospective thing can happen where the fixture has to be played again or anything like that. But there's an awful lot of moving parts, and I think the Galway County Board are going to have to stand up and be counted here, because they were made aware of it beforehand. And I don't like, a lot of people would say that it's sour grapes after the fact. It definitely isn't, because it has been raised before the fact. And my sense from Kinvara is this is just purely a public health issue. It's purely the amount of money that they have spent on signage and sanitisers and everything else, and the amount of other clubs have spent on that as well, and that it's just not it's not an ethically or morally right thing to do if it did happen.